And I wondered if you could start off by telling me a little bit about what makes Harlem Harlem.
There's so many Harlems. There's a Harlem of my youth. Until I was age 5, I lived on 139th and Riverside, and that's the early 70s. So Harlem is a very dirty, crime-ridden place, and that image stays with me. There's the Harlem now, which is very gentrified. A lot of young people coming in, a lot of white people coming in, new restaurants, new stores. So that's the current version. A lot of the places I describe in the book, which takes place in 59 and 61 and 64, have been demolished and now are big box stores like movie theaters and Nike stores and stuff like that. So the architecture has changed. There's the Harlem of 1860, which is farmland. Nothing's there. Most people still live downtown. And then speculators started laying in subway lines to nowhere, knowing that people would come. Builders started building tenements and townhouses. So then there's the Harlem of the late 19th century, which is a churn of Italians, Irish, Jews, German people, all coming to New York, finding a place in those old buildings, entering the middle class and leaving. And then there's the Harlem of 1920s, where Black folks from the South are fleeing Jim Crow, segregation, and moving to the North, to New York City. And Harlem becomes the center of Black America. So all those different Harlems exist, and fragments of them, I think, are in the book.
So could you explain a little bit about why you chose to write about this very specific period? So as you say, the book begins in 1959 and it takes us up to the Harlem riots of 1964. What was it about that period that made you want to write about it in particular?
I always make these decisions and then I have to sell them in the book and they become real. So, but often they're quite arbitrary. So in this case, I knew I wanted to write a heist novel. I was thinking how much I love heist movies, and gave myself permission to work in that genre. So I thought, the criminals might use some big calamity in New York City as a distraction for their business. And so the sanitation strike of the early 70s, or the blackout of 77, the anti-police riots of the early 40s, or the anti-police riots of 64. So I picked 64, mostly because it was closer to my New York. And then I have to sell it. I have to do the research and make it real. And so that was very fun. And I needed a hero for my heist novel. So I started doing some research and hit upon the idea of using a fence. In a lot of these stories, they steal the $2 million in jewels. They go through all this trouble. Half the gang is killed. And then they stumble into the office of the fence, who's like the intermediary between the criminal world and the more legit world. And he says, I'll give you 10 cents on the dollar. And it's always so appalling. So I decided that a fence would be a good protagonist. And he became Ray Carney.
He's a man who has a sort of legitimate life, and his past is that his father was very much involved in crime, and he's tried to make a life for himself. Part of the novel is about his attempts to escape, I guess, that past, and maybe his inability to do so. Why was that a theme that you wanted to look at? Because it's this idea of whether you can escape your roots.
Well, I mean, it plays out in different ways in the book. A fence is an intermediary between the crooked world and the straight world. Someone like Ray Carney, who has a real business, a furniture store, and also this side business selling stolen goods, is in between. He's has one foot in the legit world and one foot in the crooked world, and I like that duality. Part of the novel is tracing his embrace and rejection of his criminal self, his dark side, and I think a lot of us have that. Have less savory parts of our personality that we learn to put in check because we're part of a society and have to function. And then some people don't learn how to keep their bad selves in check. So narrating that that drama of being normal, but then also being kind of abnormal was compelling.
One of the things that I found really interesting about the book was this concept of what Ray calls dorvée, this idea of this time in the middle of the night when everyone else is sleeping, when you wake up and achieve things, whatever that might be. Where did you come across this idea? And I wonder whether it was something that you do creatively. Is that a time that you wake up and do any writing, or are you fast asleep?
When I was younger, definitely. Well, I'll explain what it is, which is, before we had electricity, a lot of people had segmented sleep. And so you work on the farm all day, you get up at the crack of dawn, nighttime comes and there's no electricity, and you go to sleep, and your body rhythm is such that you wake up in the middle of the night for a brief period and then go back to sleep. And so this was a common thing, and it's written about in history. And I came across an article about it and thought, okay, one day I'll use this. And it occurred to me that the criminal life is dorvée. Dorvée comes from the French, meaning wake, sleep. It's prime time, crime time. I want to put that in the book, but it sounds too corny. But from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. in that middle bit of segmented sleep is when, yes, criminals are up, and alcoholics and writers. And I've had overlap with various of the subgroups, but it's a place when most of the world is asleep and you're awake, and the night is a canvas for that nocturnal life. So I used to, when I was younger, in my late 20s, I did have a second shift of work at night, like 10 to 1. And with my first two books, I remember playing Radiohead and Underworld. It was the late 90s, and scribbling notes for the next day's work. But now I have kids. I'm just too tired, so there is no second shift. Come 7 p.m., I'm out for the day, just drinking wine and watching reality TV.
It's really clear that you're having a lot of fun writing this book. The dialogue, the characters, there's a vast array of characters, and just the sheer sort of verve and energy in the plotting. Was this an enjoyable experience, the writing of this book?
I mean, it has its hard parts. I mean, the fun stuff is what you just described. The hard part is the mechanics of plot, revealing things to the reader, withholding. There's an actual heist in the first 100 pages. Does it make sense, or did I screw it up? And so it's not all fun. It's the usual terror of writing a book. But my last two books, dealt with institutional racism, Jim Crow, segregation in the South, the criminal justice system, and immediately there wasn't that much room for humor, and humor is part of my project. A lot of my earlier books have a lot of jokes and satire. So, and so the story of Ray Carney allowed me to, work in that vein again, and that was great. The characters of the Underground Railroad and Nickel Boys are very much controlled by these institutional pressures of racism, capitalism. And it's hard for them to win. And in Ray Carney, I have someone who is winning. He's taking, he has agency, and he's fighting back.